Good evening, day, whatever it is, time when you're watching this. Welcome to my living room on stage. And I got Ryan here with us, the worship and adult ministries pastor candidate. And we want to do a little Q&A so that everybody has a chance to kind of hear some of Ryan's heart and get to know him a little bit. I wanted to, before we go into the questions, just kind of summarize the process that we've been in so far, which is that it's been about a year and a half, more than that we've been looking for a worship pastor and adult ministries pastor, full-time position. And so council had SLMB appoint a search team and have been working on that. That search team's been working together for a year and a half. Have looked at a lot of different candidates, and nothing's panned out. Either it's on their end or on our end. We use a search agency, but that whole process has helped us to see a lot of different candidates that are out there and what different people would look like in this position. And so we then, very recently, just before Christmas, Ryan contacted me and said, does it need to be a full-time or could you consider something else? And I said, let's talk. Because Ryan and I had talked a couple years ago and about this as I was trying to twist his arm to take this job, but the timing wasn't right, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But so we started interviewing Ryan as a search team. The search team was excited about bringing Ryan on and proposing him as the candidate to SLMB. Then SLMB discussed this and looked at it and met with the search team, and then unanimously voted to approve him to take him as the candidate, Ryan's candidate, to council. Council deliberated over this as well, and with the search team, and then they also unanimously voted to take Ryan as the candidate to the congregation. And so that's where we are now. He has gone through search team, SLMB, and council, all with unanimous approval. And now we're taking him to the congregation. And excited to present him to you for you to get to know him. If you have not come and checked out your church mailbox, there is a profile about Ryan in there that explains some of his background and things like that you might want to come by and pick up. But let's go ahead and do this interview.
Sounds good.
I've made you sit there awkwardly long enough.
That's fine.
Okay. And so I asked people to send in questions, and I got one. So one came in. So I'm going to do one, and I added some of my own then. And Ryan has not seen these. I wanted this to be kind of off the cuff because Ryan's good at that, and he's really thought through a lot of stuff. He's processed a lot of things, and so I think it shows kind of his heart and his ability when we just kind of do it this way. And that's what a Q&A session would be. He wouldn't have the questions ahead of time, so here we go.
All right.
Ryan, so after college, and you went to Tabor here, you started out in church ministry at Avonfeld, interim position there, worship and youth pastor.
Yep.
I'll get to a question here in a second, but yeah.
Thank you for telling me about myself.
Yeah. As if you didn't know.
Yeah.
And then you went on to study at Denver Seminary, and you were working there on your master's degrees. And while you're doing that, began working at Lighthouse Ministry, which is a church plant of an MB church plant. And then you returned to Hillsboro a couple years ago to teach Bible at Tabor College, and you've been doing that now for a couple of years. So what brings you to this point right now to say, yeah, I want to hop back into church ministry?
That's a really good question, and it's one that definitely should be answered. So I'm glad that was formed. So the Lord has laid on my heart ever since college to be involved and serving and helping the local church. And after moving back to Hillsboro, we felt this burden to be involved, to help out in churches. But we really felt like, at least for my own capacity, that I needed to put that on hold while finishing up some stuff in school. I was a full-time student working on my THM, writing my thesis right when we got here. So I actually hadn't completed that degree when we moved here. So that plays into it a little bit. And then I started working on PhD work, and I've heard horror stories of students who start their PhD and they end up having to drop out for a variety of different reasons. So I didn't want to add too many things to my plate all at once. And so really we were trying to walk forward in wisdom without doing a disservice to either education, academia, or the local church. And so now at this point, I feel like through this process of being in the PhD program for a year now, having a chapter and some under my belt, and having taught at Tabor for a few semesters now, I feel like I have an understanding of what it takes to do that side of things. And along with that, I felt like I have the capacity to take on more. And so part-time, half-time job, just very practically speaking, can fit into that equation at this point. I know you mentioned that we talked a couple of years ago, and it was at that point that I started to feel like this could be a potential fit, but there's nothing super duper spiritual about it now I felt God's voice speaking directly to me, and now I'm released to do this. No, there's nothing quite like that, but through just a process of discernment, we felt like the Lord was opening this door at this point. And in our conversations, getting to know one another and our theological bent and the way that HMB does ministry, I felt like it was a really good fit. And it really has been kind of a natural progression here. So now seems like a good time. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I agree. It's been good to get to know you, Ryan, over the couple of years, and we've been able to talk through a lot of theological issues and things like that, and you've gotten to hear my perspective here too. So when you hire somebody completely from the outside, you can find out in an interview, something of what they believe, but there's a little bit of a shot in the dark, not sure what you will get. So there's some comfort in knowing that we've been around each other for 2 years, and so you say a lot of people, I think, if they were looking at this, would say, I don't know how I could do that. You just had a baby, and you're teaching, you're doing your PhD, and you're going to throw this job on top of that. So it kind of leads into my next question then. Somebody asked was, how does Rachel feel about all this?
Oh, that's a good question.
Rachel's his wife.
Yeah.
How does Rachel feel about all this you taking?
Yeah, and of course that question would be best directed to her. And I would encourage anybody to ask her about that. But in our conversations, she's been very supportive. This is something that we both have a vision for. And so I think she's ecstatic. We've been wanting to plug in a deeper way. And this is a way to do that. I wouldn't say that that's the way that everyone should pursue that, but we love this church. We've loved attending. We've been coming for a little while now, and to take this next step, as far as she's told me, she's very supportive. And we've talked about this, especially recently, on a daily basis. So this isn't something that that I'm jumping into without her knowledge or consent. This is something we've both talked through logistics on, even stuff like childcare and whatnot. We're thinking about it all the time.
And being a pastor's wife,
Yep.
ministry is not new to her.
Right.
Either. And we've had you guys in our small group for maybe half a year to a year, and got to know Ryan and Rachel, and both very thoughtful people. They're thinkers. They're not jumping into anything flippantly, but you've thought through stuff. So yeah, good. Thanks. Another question. So I'd say, it's probably too early to have a well-developed plan for discipleship here at our church, because you got to get to know the people and everything and what we're doing. But what is your view, just kind of more, maybe a general view of discipleship in the church?
Yeah.
And vision.
Yeah, well, I'll start on a really maybe an obvious level for some, but maybe not so much for others. When we think about discipleship, it can really devolve into certain specific practices where you are discipled if you are doing X, Y, and Z. And typically that looks like something similar to having a mentor that you go and have a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly meeting with to catch up and talk about churchy related things. And that's not bad at all. But discipleship at its heart, I believe, is discipleship to Jesus Christ. So in as far as you are becoming more like Christ, you are becoming disciple. This is the first thing that Jesus calls his disciples to do, is to follow him. And Paul says to imitate him as he imitates Christ, and be imitators of God. So really the model that we see in Scripture for discipleship is discipleship to Christ, and insofar as other people are looking like Christ, that's as far as we are to be like them. So discipleship then is diving into the Word together to discover who Jesus is, who is this God in human flesh that we can now see in a way that we can understand and imitate. And so that's the heart behind it. And as if we can find ways to put that into practice on a really basic level, that's where I'm going to hope to begin. And with that vision at the top, then we can see what people down from the congregational level all the way down to the individual level, what we need to do to become more like Christ. And I really appreciate that. We're going through the Sermon on the Mount. This is some really practical stuff. Jesus is explaining what it means to follow him. And so, yeah, again, I'd love to dive into specific practices, but you're right. I would need to get a better handle on how we're doing as a congregation and just culturally relevant stuff to help inform how we would answer that on a more precise level. But I intend to work hand in hand with you on this as well. It's not going to be something that any one person can do, lest the church ends up imitating them instead of Christ. So we're all in this together, but I would be happy to help spearhead this endeavor.
Awesome. And so, yeah, for those, I think a lot of people get focused on that we're bringing Ryan on as a worship pastor, and we are, but they're also overseeing the discipleship and adult ministries, part of that as well. So that's why I asked that question. Great. That's awesome. Another question. So we've asked you to come on and help kind of move our church into a more contemporary worship style, or I don't know the best way to even express that. But everybody here is contemporary, and some people think, yes, I want that, and some people freak out about that. But, if we went around the congregation, if I asked people to define what is contemporary, probably everybody would have a different definition. So don't flip out when I say, we've asked them to come in and make us more contemporary, but that's what we've asked you to do. What are some changes, or what's your vision? What do you see kind of the music aspect of worship or the worship experience looking like?
Okay. This is a question that I think probably a lot of people are waiting to hear some sort of answer to. So I'm going to take a little bit of time. And I think probably the best thing to do at the get-go is to just clarify, by going in a contemporary direction, or however we've decided to word it, doesn't necessarily mean, oh no, now I can't sing some of the most beloved hymns that I absolutely love, and this is a deep part of my childhood. There's a reason why some of these hymns have stood the test of time, and that's because they're beautiful songs with a beautiful message. For example, It Is Well is not going anywhere. Blessed Assurance is not going anywhere. And those sorts of hymns, I can't see in the near future them ever leaving our repertoire. That would be kind of nuts. But the way that music has shifted over time, the melody lines have gotten a lot simpler. And I think the purpose behind that has been for the congregation who maybe doesn't have a lot of musical background to be able to participate in a really accessible way. The same thing for the chord progressions. There's usually like 4 or 5 chords in more contemporary hymns, or contemporary songs. And that makes it quite a bit easier for musicians. So the level of musical ability has been lowered in some senses to allow the facilitation of your average person. And another good example is not everybody can read out of the hymn book. And maybe that was the case, and I kind of doubt it, but maybe that was the case, a number of years ago. I think maybe some people were just not gifted and didn't want to admit it, but maybe they were really great singers, who knows. So that is the heart behind it, and a lot of the more contemporary music is conducive for that. So the style of the music, and a lot of times people hear something and they know, hey, that's in a form that's more recent as opposed to 4-part harmonies. But again, singing harmonies hasn't gone anywhere either. With a lot of these contemporary songs, there's harmony lines in the background as well. So I think probably the easiest way to explain it, though, is that the style has changed. And I think it will continue to change as musical taste continues to change. So that's, I want people to recognize that these songs, these beloved songs, are still going to be around. But the way that they are played, and even the instrumentation that they're being played with, has changed. And so the way that I see the music itself being done on a Sunday morning service is more in line with the way that the music has changed in more of a, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, a popular Christian cultural sense. So that, I hope I covered it. But again, for anybody in the congregation, I am totally willing to talk more about details if you'd like. But I do think that this is something that has been a part of my job description. So it's not up for debate in the broader sense, although when we get into the details, we can chat about that a little bit.
So I kind of tuned out. I think you're saying we're going heavy metal. Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly, okay. Actually.
Heavy metal. No, kidding. Great. And one more question before I give you a real softball question. These are the last of my hard questions.
Okay.
What does a halftime position look like? So we were looking for a full-time position, and you're not able to do that. And I tell you, when I first, well, I want to answer this question right now. I keep answering my own questions. From your perspective, we're asking you to do half-time position, and what's that look like, and how are you going to plan your time and use of time?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I wish I could say, well, I can do a full-time amount of work in half the time. And
Yes.
that would be really great, wouldn't it? But that obviously is not the answer. And so as far as manpower goes, luckily there are other people on staff. I mean, Sarah Rempel is going to stick around, and she'll definitely be helping me with worship side of things. So there will be people contributing as well. So you've been looking for a full-time person to fill this role, and I'm going to do what I can with the time that I have. And having experience in the background, there shouldn't be a huge learning curve, and I know there will be, as there is with any new job. But I bring a bit of experience, and I have a good idea of where I want to go. So it's a matter of getting adjusted, and once that happens, my vision is to see things split 50-50 between the worship ministry and adult ministries. So with a halftime role, just really pragmatically, I will be spending 2 full days working here at the church, in addition to the days that I work at Tabor College. And then on Wednesday nights and Sundays, those are additional times that are included in the workload. So that brings it up to a halftime position. And ideally, one of those Tuesday or Thursdays will be spent to completely work on the worship ministry, and the other day will be devoted to the adult ministry. So ideally, in the future, at some point, it'll be 50-50 based just on the days of the week. But at this point, I think what will naturally happen, and this happens so often in churches, is that the worship service on Sunday morning is the big event that everybody in the congregation comes to and participates in. So at the beginning, that will probably get more of my attention, unless there is some really critical thing happening in adult ministries that I need to give oversight to. It'll shift as needed, but if we hit the equilibrium, it's 50-50 based on Tuesday, Thursday.
Cool. All right, that's my hard questions. Now, when I first came on here 7 years ago when I was candidating, and I don't come out of the MB background, I remember my Q&A, somebody asked me this question, so I got to give it to you. Do you speak High German or Low German?
Both. No.
And I didn't understand why they were asking me that question at that time. I knew so little about Mennonite Brethren. No. Just a quick get to know you question, just to kind of end it type of thing, would be like, when you used to have free time, you won't have free time anymore, but like in your free time, what do you like to do?
Okay. Well, my free time recently has been spent taking care of our 5-month-old Cora, and I anticipate that most of my free time in the future will be spent doing that and hanging out with her. And my wife, Rachel, of course. But what things that I love to do, I love playing guitar. I play violin. I haven't played as much violin as guitar recently, but those are things that I enjoy to do. As a prof, I love reading, and so if I get a chance to read something other than what I'm currently doing research on, that's always a plus, and I enjoy doing that. Those are probably the big highlights, especially recently. Rachel and I love going on walks and chatting, and we like to do those on our on our days off or over lunch breaks and stuff. We're both working at Tabor right now, so we can do that during the warmer months. But
what does Rachel do at Tabor?
Rachel is in the academic office, so she is the first face that you would see if you were going in to see people like Frank Johnson or Emily Olson or Scott Franz or Caitlin Rempel also works in there. So she runs that front desk area, and she helps take care of academic things, transcripts, and when students come in and need something, she's kind of the first line there.
Awesome. Great. That's all my questions. Thanks for taking some time here. And is there anything you would like to say that hasn't been asked or you haven't got to or anywhere?
I don't. I've been asked a lot of questions, and I know that some of my answers to one group maybe didn't translate or get over to another group. And I just want to reiterate that I'd be happy to answer whatever questions that people have. I don't have anything that I'm trying to, hide or keep on the down low or whatever. So I'd be happy to answer questions, or if I've answered and you're on council or on the ministry board.
Spiritual Life Ministries.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can pass along any of those answers as well. I'd be more than happy to do that. So.
Yeah, and if you got any other questions, you can't get to Ryan, you can ask anybody on the Spiritual Life Ministries board, or search team would be good. Especially search team has spent the most time with Ryan, so that would be Abigail Seacrest, Deborah Penner, Jeff Jorgensen, Jim Bowes, myself, and Sarah Rempel. So we'd be glad to answer any questions. And the vote is going to be this Sunday in person again, or if you aren't able to be out for whatever reason here on a Sunday morning, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, come into the office and you can cast your vote in the office, and then we will announce after Wednesday what that vote is and whether Ryan accepted the position or not. So we're assuming he's going to say yes if we vote him.
Yeah.
But all right, that's it. Thanks for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.